Oh yeah, the key.
Yeah, the key.
Yeah.
So I had been thinking, and I had just come to the conclusion about the emulsification and stuff like that, like we were talking about with the elements. But it was really interesting because I was really starting to understand how the elements work in this kind of way. And then I was lying in bed, I was falling asleep, and without realizing it, I started to think in that way where the thoughts are just really a dream. You know what I mean?
That's my favorite way to think. Yes.
Where I was essentially half asleep.
Yes.
But I hadn't realized it. So thought I was awake. But I saw in my head after this, I saw this spiral galaxy, you know? And I don't think the spiral galaxy imagery is important. I think it was filtered from like some
it's just a reservoir concept.
media.
Okay.
But the
That's
point
a
is,
reservoir
the point is, I saw a spiral. In the middle of the spiral, I saw a key in a keyhole.
Yeah.
And I had to reach my hand into the keyhole to turn the key, and it was the key to the universe and the secrets of the universe.
Yeah.
And so I was starting to reach my hand, and I had to go like all the way up to my elbow, and I still wasn't there.
Yeah.
And I started to realize, I thought, okay, if I just went to my shoulder, I could get it. But I started to realize, okay, this is a key. I'm gonna have to reach my entire self in the keyhole in order to turn it. And I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And then I didn't do it, and I started to realize, okay, I'm half dreaming here. What is this coming from? I didn't intend to think this. So, and I instead just thought, and we might want to cut this part, but I instead just thought basically that I just wanted to think about women instead, which is really stupid.
No, I did the same thing.
But I'm still gonna say that because what was important is it occurred to me.
Yes.
Basically, my id there, just my normal cardinal bodily desires, were what were keeping me grounded enough to not jump into a keyhole and dissolve.
Yes, that's amazing. So it seems like we have weakness, and like this is where Joe Rogan's like, we should become graves, and I'm like, no, idiot, it's a lot scarier than that. God gave us these tools that seem to hold us back, but in reality, it's like your id saved you there.
Yeah. So my trip, and I was sober, but nevertheless,
natural DMT from your pineal gland.
Yeah. Nevertheless, I was thinking about data and how you store it on, like, you can store it on paper or a computer, but it still gets weathered. It still gets ruined by water or fire. Yeah. Specifically water or fire, and I started conceptualizing this with reference to the elements, the four elements, earth, water, fire, and air. Those are interesting elements because they go with the four states of matter: earth to solid, water to liquid, air to gas, fire to plasma.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, it's not that crazy that water and fire would kind of destroy data. And it's really weird, but it's very true that data just always gets destroyed by these things. Like, it's not something that we really think of, but no matter what, you can put data on anything and it still will get destroyed by water and fire. Like, you can protect against it, but it's always fundamentally gonna get destroyed by those things.
Yeah.
So,
That's interesting.
Well, water and fire are like the chaotic elements, right?
yeah, that's what I've said before, is that water and fire are the chaotic elements compared to earth and air, which are the more orderly elements. I think this is justified by pulling from literature and art, where water and fire are given really chaotic properties. Like, they're used specifically to wash away orders that are bad, which is what chaos does in real life.
Great flood.
Right. Yeah, like the Great Flood, exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect. So Pillar of Fire. Splitting the Red Sea. There's a lot of them in there.
Yeah.
So sticking with this assertion that water and fire are the more chaotic elements, it kind of makes sense that they would like decimate orders. Or decimate data, because data is a little order that represents a bigger order. That's what it is.
Well,
That's interesting. Holy shit.
It's a little order that represents a bigger order.
Think about that. Like, you're trying to gather
Yeah.
data
Fractal
to try and prove a point, to try and learn a greater concept. Because sometimes...
Oh, shit, you're right. Because, like, in order to, like, create a picture, you have to make a bunch of little epistemological functions.
Right. Which is... This has been...
It's like Tetris. So, but here's the thing, is the ink is... It's liquid, right?
I'll get to
Like,
that.
Get to it.
Yeah. Okay. So this is not too complicated. That that data would get destroyed by the chaotic elements.
Okay.
Makes sense.
It does.
What was troubling me was how it seemed like the processes were kind of different here. Like the way water destroys paper, or paper and ink data is very different from the way it destroys a computer, even though it's the same data, same chaos, and fire likewise destroys them in different ways. And I couldn't really put my finger on why, and then it hit me after a while that like water destroys it tends to destroy paper by flooding it, by emulsion. It just takes it over, and fire does that same slow destruction of a computer, but fire and paper just burns through, and water just shorts a computer instantly. And I think what this is that it took me a while to think of this. I was laying in bed thinking about this, and it eventually hit me that what's happening here is that the data, see, we think about paper as being the main thing for data here, but the data is actually being stored in ink. The paper is like a background. But the data is getting stored in ink, which is a liquid, a water,
So
that is to
chaos.
say.
So it's like
So the reason the water emulsifies it is because it's actually the same element taking it over, whereas fire has more of like a canceling out effect.
Okay.
This is some real weird shit, by the
Dude,
way.
no, I get it. It's
But-
like, it's like in a computer.
Yeah.
A
'Cause there's
computer
plasma.
uses fire,
Plasma.
Fire.
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
we're considering plasma and fire. the same
Yeah,
thing.
because
It's
same element.
Right.
Same element.
Right,
In
so-
fact, we got to think about things like that. We don't want to get into the trap of
Because
like
the element
thinking
of
about
fire
like
correlates with the scientific element of plasma.
yeah, and we're gonna
So
do
it's
that
perfect.
because I think the
State of
ancients
matter.
had a bit of trouble with this, where they
Expand
would
on
try
your
to
point, Gaetano.
where they would
Yeah.
try to make. Can I just?
Yeah.
Where they would try to make where they would try to derive by sources, like water is the source of this.
Yeah.
So they might accidentally make paper water, but if you think about it as being representative of the state of matter, paper's a solid. It's earth.
Right. No, we're definitely talking about state of matter. Like in a computer,
Yeah, there's plasma, the circuits.
I'm getting after the
Yeah.
In a computer, the plasma or the fire, is the power that transmits the information onto the hard drive, which is the Earth.
Yeah. And
Oh, shit.
we still got the same thing about a background of earth
Yeah.
with a chaotic element writing the data.
Yeah. Right. But like with fire, it's so chaotic. It's the farthest planet away. It's
Yeah.
so chaotic that it has to put the information onto Earth because it can't do that.
Yeah.
With water,
It's slower.
it's slower, and there's time for the water to change itself. So
Yeah.
you could think about this in a crazy manner of water being the more motherly version that turns itself into part of the solid.
So water's
But
the
fire
feminine chaos
is a
and
lot
masculine
faster.
It's a
chaos.
masculine.
Right.
Feminine and masculine
Yeah.
chaos. That's
Mhm.
interesting.
So the masculine fire one
Reservoirs come together.
is so insane.
I had it a different way.
Dude, interruption.
Yeah.
Dude, the fire is so crazy that it's gonna burn itself if it doesn't get the information directly onto Earth as fast as possible.
Well, what I'm getting at is because the way I conceptualize the difference between fire and water is that fire was the most chaotic.
Right.
So that would also explain. And then water is the less chaotic, and likewise earth is the most orderly, why it makes the best background, whereas air is less orderly. So you can write something in steam, but it tends to... You can write something in steam, it'll tend to fade away because water is only a little bit more chaotic than the orderly air. Electricity will stay in the air a little longer.
Yeah. But the other crazy thing I was thinking is air is the most important element because it also encapsulates spirit to it.
Should we make the quintessential distinction here?
What?
Because there's 4 elements, but there's also the quintessence, the 5th element, and that was something that was described since ancient Greeks. Yes, they call it. Don't use the word ether. Quintessence. So the Greeks, when they were talking about the 4 elements, discussed the need for a 5th element to represent essentially the divine, since the other 4 elements are like earthly elements and thus can't really represent the divine. So the quintessence was created as a 5th element that would represent divinity, and this is mirrored in the Japanese elements, where they had the same 4 elements and they had the 5th element of heaven, which is very similar to the quintessence, but it's more up, it's more heaven. So you could see how the air concept would leak into that.
Right, but the air is the most powerful of
because the atmosphere is kind of leaking in and out of the space.
But the thing is though, and I want to make this.
Too.
This isn't necessarily true, but I want to point out that in a lot of representations of air, it goes with wind, and is often considered distinct from the sky and the heavens.
It's still a pathway. The wind still is connected to the air, and it's still connected. We're not claiming that it is.
Okay.
We're not claiming that the 4th element, which is air, is the heavens. That's not what we're saying.
Yeah.
But it's the way to get there.
Didn't the Greeks have something that they nearly... the ether, right? So the Greeks,
the ether.
So they nearly came up with the idea that there must be a heavenly element. But they were,
they did,
but they nearly figured out that it would have been plasma or fire, based on its scientific.
Let me just. You're close, but it's not quite right.
Yeah.
The Greeks were really close to figuring out that stars were made of plasma, but they dogmatized it too much. Yeah, because they had figured out by a really complex
rationalization.
Yeah, rationalistic process
that it must be plasma somehow.
Yeah, they'd figured out this rationalistic process that defined the order of the elements, like as we think of it, earth,
fire,
water,
and then it
air,
must also be fire or plasma.
Yeah, and they figured out once they figured out the order of the elements, they realized that earth is the lowest element, and then it's the water, then it's the air,
and fire.
Then the fire must be up there in the heavens, which is actually how it works, because gravity will make the denser elements come in.
Yes, we could say.
Yeah.
Or
so this is actually a real, really complex scientific thing that they're essentially noticing with this rationalistic process.
Because of they came up with the idea that anything up there must be heavenly and thusly something else.
Exactly. So they called the substance of the stars
ether
or ether.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Ether, and at first they were debating over what ether was made out of.
Got
They
it.
almost settled on fire, plasma, which would have been right, but they instead settled that ether should be the quintessence.
Yeah,
because it's heavenly.
Yeah.
Which is wrong.
Got it.
And to this day, people refer to the quintessence as ether, which is really confusing.
Great.
That is confusing, actually. I understand.
Here's my question. So liquid is chaotic. So ink is liquid, right?
Yeah. Yep. Liquid
so
is
when
chaotic.
you're taking down data.
Yeah.
So is this a rationalization exercise? So what is that? We store data in essentially 2 ways: note taking and computers now, right? This is the ways. No, I guess you could.
You could also carve stone.
But that's earthly.
That's interesting.
Abrasion seems to be kind of chaotic. Because you're carving into it.
True, but a little bit iffy.
Technically, you're using the element concept of fire. This would be wrapped into that.
Why would
I don't.
fire?
Because you're making heat by rubbing objects against each other.
I'm cautious about this.
That is
I'm cautious about it.
Because here we're taking fire as a state too, not just heat.
They have essences. These 4 concepts have essences, and this would this would be represented
It might move
in
it
the
into
essence.
the essence of fire because it's abrasive and there's heat and it's friction.
Yeah.
It's not really earth.
I'm troubled with this. I think we might have to
No,
maybe
it
back
is.
off of the
The
assertion
no.
that chaos is necessary for the writing of data.
No, yeah, because it is chaos. Abrasion is chaotic and it's stored in earth, which is stone.
Yeah.
Yes, abrasion is chaotic, friction is chaotic, heat is chaotic, and it's stored in stone.
And this plane, this thing we're creating, is a fourth dimensional thing that we can't fully understand.
I'm aware of the...
Process that and
True.
really give that an open-minded thought.
No, it's totally true. Everything's like that.
Well,
There's
yeah,
always-
This specifically though, this is a rule that applies.
Yeah, we're defining rules that we can't perceive or understand but are probably true. This is what we're doing.
So here's my
That
point.
being said, we shouldn't assume they're true.
Here's what I was saying is, so you have paper, which is order because it's earth, it's solid, right? Earth is solid. If you go back, they call it fire, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
So you have, but liquid, the ink that you write on it with, right?
Yep.
That's chaotic.
Yep.
This is now data. So when chaos and order seem to come together in this way, chaos on top of a lens of order, it's data.
Okay.
Right? But a human consciousness has to have done it somehow.
So what makes it data, though, is that it's an order that represents a larger order.
Okay. So then the chaotic elements always ruin this data. You can spill water on your paper, or you can accidentally light your
it
paper
overtakes
fire
it.
with a candle at your table side, right?
Yeah, it overtakes it, yep.
So, and then computers are plasma, which is the chaotic element, in a hard drive, which is
Earth.
You can short circuit it with a chaotic element of water,
Or you can emulsify it with more plasma.
Which when you pour water on ink, it emulsifies and ruins because it starts to run again.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what is?
Is emulsion?
Yeah.
It's like it's overtaking with the same element, I guess. It's like
Oh yeah,
it's
because
like
the
the
ink
water.
is what
The ink gets lost
burn-
in the water.
Burn and short circuit is like zap. Like what's that?
Shorting.
Shorting.
What exactly is it? I don't know.
I like
And we
zap.
get into a bit of
I like
we
zap.
get into a bit of asymmetry here because we could say water and fire cancel each other out, and that's kind of true to an extent, which makes sense for the shorting and it makes sense for the burning of the paper. But the mode of interaction is a little bit different. When you burn paper, you're burning the paper, not really the ink. When you short,
It's because the liquid gives itself into the solid to make something. They have different methods. If you sat in a dark room your whole life, you would be an idiot.
Yeah, you would have nothing to base anything. I wonder, dudes. I hope the government's done this test to just lock a baby in a dark room its whole life. What would it envision?
Animals. It's an animal.
No.
It turns into an animal.
it's happened. Someone did that to a poor child.
It turns into an animal.
What happened?
Their consciousness dies. It turns into an animal.
Kind of.
Is that what happened?
Yes,
No, they
yes,
can't.
that's what happened.
It
Dude,
can happen if they're in the wild, but if they're locked in a dark room, a lot of times they're more like a toddler.
Forever?
Yeah, after a certain point, it becomes really difficult to develop. So like
That
they'll might
exists.
like
Oh,
they get them up to like maybe a 9-year-old at best, and then that's it.
Oh my god.
Nine.
I was
Not
thinking
nine,
like
4.
so we like form epistemological concepts around what we see. I was just thinking it would form weird, strange, abstract epistemological concept around its own imagination.
But it wouldn't have any stimuli.
Yeah, it would have
Dude,
nothing
imagine
to
if a
reflect
baby
on.
had no stimuli.
Would it be able to create anything? No.
No,
Dude, that's
Damn.
it's
fucking
actually
insane, bro.
We have
observable
no
that
free will.
social.
It's just all reflecting and it's just a super
It's
complicated
not.
reaction to
It's
everything.
not. It's not.
So
It's not.
yeah.
It's like.
Well, okay. Look,
It's not
I've
No, because
derived
we
this.
make the choice
Look,
to reflect on it.
Gaetano, I got you. I
It's
derived
like
this.
You and I can picture a rock differently.
Yep, that's exactly what it is. Man.
Yeah.
I'm glad you figured it out.
Okay.
Shit.
You
This
can
is
kill
how it
by not
works.
giving it stimuli.
Yeah.
This is how it works.
School.
Look,
Yeah, school's trying to fucking kill us.
listen.